From Miller Waldrop Studios, this is Campus Live.
What's up, Campus Live fans? Logan here in the Miller Waldrop Studios for another episode of the Guns Blazin podcast. I'm your host, Logan, with my co-host, Lane, as always. Lane, crazy week in college football last week, but a tough one for Texas Tech fans.
It was, like you said, it was a crazy week. There was a bunch of teams that were ranked that went down, and unfortunately one of those teams was our Texas Tech Red Raiders. And here in a second, we'll recap that whole game, and then obviously look forward ahead to Oklahoma State. But, I'm excited to be here for another episode, Logan, and let's get started.
Let's hop right into it. Texas Tech, number 7 team, traveled on the road to Tempe, Arizona to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils and fell to the Arizona State Sun Devils. A late touchdown from the Arizona State Sun Devils capped off what was a pretty amazing comeback for Texas Tech in that fourth quarter, where they scored 15 points in just a matter of minutes to really get them back, and they even took the lead at one point. But it felt like a majority of the game they were getting dominated on both sides of the football.
Yeah, Arizona State, obviously, you see the final score is 26-22. It looks, honestly, probably a lot closer than the game actually was. We did make a great comeback in the end. We'll touch on that later in this recap. I thought it was one of the real positives of this game. But with Barron out, Will Hammond, I would say he struggled in this start. He ended up throwing for 167 and for 2 touchdowns, and he did have an interception, but it really wasn't his fault. It was a drop that kind of deflected and found its way into Arizona State defender's hands. And then, I thought Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson, they had probably their best passing game of the year. Leavitt, he threw for 309 with a touchdown, and then Jordan Tyson, obviously, he went off. He had 10 for 105 and a touchdown, and a lot of that came on that last drive where you saw them go score the game-winning touchdown. But, I thought the story of the game, Logan, was how much our offense struggled for the majority of the game, where Arizona State had 37 minutes of possession versus our 22 minutes. Anytime you're playing a good team on the road, that is just a recipe for disaster. We were 6 of 16 on third down, had a lot of third and longs because we weren't running the ball, and we weren't running it effectively with Will, but then also for some reason the game plan for Coach Leftwich was interesting, I would say, to say the least. We only had 12 carries between Cam Dickey and Jacoby Williams after we just ran for almost 400 yards on Kansas. I thought that was kind of interesting from Coach Leftwich. While, Will, he had 15 carries, so more than both of them. But our defense, hey, they played great. They even though they gave up that late touchdown, they were on the field so much in this game. And Coach McGuire even said in his press conference on Monday, our defense was on the field way too much. And, you saw the results of that at the end of the game, letting Arizona State drive down and win the game. But they hold them to 4 field goals, and they really, forced 4 turnovers, and somehow every single fumble wound its way back in an Arizona State player's hand, Logan. And, it was a weird game. Yeah.
It was, to say the least. My takeaway, Jordan Tyson looked like the best player on the field. And especially like you're talking about at the end of that game, he took over. The big play, obviously, the 4th and 2. And he goes for 33 yards and sets them up not only in field goal range, but then they turn into a touchdown. He then later in that drive gets the pass interference on Bryce Pollock in the end zone. It gives them 1st and goal from the 2. They punch it in. It just felt like he was beating the man coverage more than we have seen anybody really torch the secondary. And other than him, really, you didn't see a lot going on that side of things. I know Sam Leavitt threw for over 300, but it didn't look as bad, but he was just a playmaker out there, and you saw he had 1/3 of the total passing yards. He was just the best player on their team. And then the defense, like you said, they played too much. The pass rush got home early a lot. David Bailey, 2 sacks on the first drive. He was great again. Now he's getting some Heisman recognition in some polls. He's been amazing. The defense was great, but you can't play 40 minutes in a college football game and expect the defense to hold the other team to 0 points. But on the flip side of things, like you talked about, Will Hammond ran the ball a ton. Now, I don't know why exactly the game plan, but it looks like maybe the box might have been a little more condensed, maybe looking at things over again. And the running game, they put more in the box, forced them to throw the ball. Will was a little inaccurate early in the game, obviously really lit it up in the fourth quarter, but there was just some things that just didn't look like the normal Texas Tech that we had come to see for the previous couple of weeks. And so it kind of makes me think that this might have been a one-off.
Yeah, and, all the recipes for an upset were occurring, and you could even see it early in this game. Like, we came out with that interesting punt formation that led to a punt block. We have not seen that formation all year long. I'm not gonna like sit here and blame the refs or anything, but the call on David Bailey, that roughing the passer, that was
a killer.
A fourth down, and it led to an eventual Arizona State touchdown. And that was not a good call. There were some other very questionable calls. You saw later on after the game, you saw Arizona State. There was a lot of plays where guys on their offensive line were false starting and they weren't calling them. I'm sure Coach McGuire and everyone has sent all those videos to the Big 12 office, but it was just a weird game all around. Like I said, our defense forced 4 fumbles and didn't recover any of them. Like it was a weird game. But a positive thing I will say is, like I said earlier, I did love the fight that we showed. We struggled all game long on the offensive side. It was a battle the whole game. And, we're not going to blow everyone out. I know we were accustomed to those 24-point wins every single week, but we're playing a really good opponent on the road. They're the reigning Big 12 champs. We knew this was going to be probably our toughest road game of the whole entire year. But Arizona State, they were backed into a wall, and they played their best game of the whole entire season. And you saw it with how well they played on the defensive side, and then obviously with Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson, how well they played too. But, I was just – I don't know. I whenever I was watching this game, I just didn't. I was just like, why was this happening? Why was this happening? All the recipes for an upset were happening, and like I think you could kind of feel it.
Yeah, you knew that something wasn't going right. For Texas Tech, for a majority of the game, I was worried.
Yeah.
And then we come up and we go up 22-19. And things kind of changed momentum-wise. You saw the crowd go out of it, Texas Tech. Then you got your best group, the defense, heading back onto the field. You feel pretty good. You get to the 4th and 2. Then the big play happens, and then it just flips right back over. And you're like, okay, well, now we're at least going to overtime. Let's get them to overtime. They eventually give up the touchdown. But, things happen.
Yeah, and I don't know how we would find this stat, but I would love to know the odds, Logan, on if you're the major favorite on the road against a team that's looking for an upset. If you have a punt blocked, I would love to know the stat on like how many times you see that lead to an upset, because it seems like every big upset that happens, there's always some special teams play, like a punt being blocked or a kick being returned for a touchdown or something like that. And that's some things we got to clean up as we head forward into this season. They're not the only good team that we're going to play. We got, first, obviously we got Oklahoma State this week. We definitely need to bounce back in a big way against maybe the worst team in all of Power 4 football right now. And then we go on the road to Kansas State. That's not going to be an easy task either, Logan.
No, and I want to touch on one more thing with Arizona State, and I think Coach Dillingham said it perfectly in his press conference on Monday. Sam Leavitt being injured with his lower body forced him to be a better pocket passer against Texas Tech, which we thought might be a disadvantage for them. And it really turned out to be an advantage. He was working through his progressions instead of trying to escape the pocket. We saw a lot of that earlier in the season, especially at Mississippi State. They should have won the game also, but we saw him trying to get out of the pocket quite often, make plays on the run. This time he sat in the pocket and his guys won in space. He had a lot of catch and run, Jordan Tyson catching, breaking tackles. They were able to do things with him in the pocket that before the game, especially in our sports show, we talked about it. If he couldn't move, we thought this would be a field day for the defensive line. But having to rush him that many times, you're eventually going to tire out. We saw that. And I think A.J. Holmes played amazing, but the depth of a defensive tackle hurt a little bit. I think having that one extra body in Skylar Gill-Howard would have been a great plus. Not saying that they struggled in any capacity, but to have to play 40, I think they had 70-plus snaps on offense. And so to be able to do that, it kind of just showed that Sam Leavitt is really probably one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the Big 12 Conference. And he showed on Saturday that even against probably the best defense that the Big 12 has produced, he was still able to do whatever he wanted for a majority of that game. But like you said, turnovers didn't bounce your way. You had some miscues on special teams. And I think we talked about it. I know I brought it up for sure in our sports show that the difference would be special teams.
Yeah.
But their kicker made everything.
He did.
He did not miss, and he really put them ahead. He capitalized on the points. And, they had one miscue on the punt at the end. You saw Coy pick up the short bouncer and, it flipped the script in our favor. One play later, Virgil scores. But, yeah, there's some things that just didn't look like the normal Texas Tech. And so we're going to find out this Saturday. Maybe this isn't a real big, eye test like, oh, we did bounce back because you are playing Oklahoma State. And we're going to talk about them later. A wide receiver turned quarterback is going to start for them this week. So we're not real sure what's going to happen, and we're in Lubbock. But you got to win out. We're going to talk about that later. You got to win out if you got any chance to make the playoff, especially the Big 12 championship game, Arizona State. Easy-ish schedule compared to some other teams in the conference. But you win out, you're going to make it either way, in my opinion. So I think we're still control our own destiny, and that's the thing that's all you can ask for right now.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it starts this week with Oklahoma State. We need to beat the heck out of them this week. We need to drop 70 points and make a statement like, all right, we're ticked off about what happened last week, and this is what it's going to look like for the rest of the season against everyone else we play. And then, obviously, then we go on the road against Kansas State, and then we have the big one here in Lubbock against BYU. BYU, they probably, which I know they got past Utah this week. They had a great win. Me and you both thought Utah was probably going to walk in and dominate that game, but
Utah did not look good for a majority of that game. I know we'll talk about that a little later, but I was not real happy with the performance that Devin Dampier and the rest of that team put on. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah, and I think it just shows how good of a coach Kalani Sitake is. I mean, he had, which we'll talk about it later, when we recap just kind of everything around the country, but man, he had his starting quarterback out, and he was one of the best returning quarterbacks in the whole entire country with Jake Retzlaff, and had to bring in a true freshman basically off not off the street, but like
pretty much,
yeah.
And brought him in the spring and gave him the summer to figure out the playbook.
And they're 7-0 now. It's pretty crazy. Sitake, he's a great coach, and we're gonna have a really tough battle whenever they come to town here. But first, we got Oklahoma State, and then the Kansas State, obviously, and what do you think? As we move, I know we shouldn't look past Oklahoma State. Obviously, don't look past anyone. But
I'm looking past.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've watched them play this season, and with the loss of the fire guy Mike Gundy, might have been a year or two too late. He's done amazing. He did amazing things there in his 21 years, and Doug Meacham coming in. Do we see them play a little better? They played Cincinnati all right at home. Only lost by a couple of touchdowns, which at this rate, I mean, it's better than what they had produced earlier in the season. But I'm looking past them.
Yeah, and I think this game next week against Kansas State on the road. Kansas State, they have a bye week this week. They're probably getting rested up. Looking forward to the game whenever we come to town. Matt Wells is their offensive coordinator, and I think that game is going to be really tough, Logan. At least in my opinion, I think.
Yeah, on paper it's not. It doesn't look like it. Kansas State is really one of those disappointing teams this year. You thought probably the Big 12 favorite this year. I know preseason we said that there was two games we were really worried about, and that was Arizona State and Kansas State. That is kind of it moved to Utah, Arizona State. Now it seems like it was just Arizona State that was real big for us so far. I think that the inconsistency is probably the biggest question mark heading into Manhattan in a couple of weeks. But Matt Wells has struggled. If you see the message boards and Kansas State message boards, they want him gone. I think he is probably gone at the end of the season. I just don't trust Avery Johnson. I know he ran for 4 touchdowns in Lubbock a couple of years ago, but they also had what would be a future national champion on their team. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, you're right, though. It is a tricky one. It's another one of those gotcha trap games that could be happening. But with this coaching staff now, you went to Arizona State and had that letdown game. You just can't afford to have another one.
Absolutely. And as we look past Tech and their schedule and everything. This past week was, Tech wasn't the only team that lost, and there was a lot of top dogs that lost, including Miami going down to Louisville on Friday night. Carson Beck had 4 interceptions, and USC transfer Miller Moss, he played a good game, and Louisville on the road, their defense played awesome too. It sort of flipped the ACC kind of on its head, and I think Georgia Tech's probably the favorite now. Wouldn't you say, Logan? Yeah.
I think so, and my preseason pick is looking much better as the weeks go by. They got the huge win against Duke on the road. Miami can't handle business at home. I think what the crazy stat was, but I think the Louisville coach is undefeated, against top 10 teams since he's been there in the regular season, which is insane stat. But you saw Miami leading up all season. They had just been so dominant on both sides of the football. The defense for sure, Ruben Bain. They get the bye week. They come and they host Louisville, who had been really, kind of up and down. They got all the talent in the world. Miller Moss, we know from last year at USC, had the talent to play. And he showed why he belonged in the Power Four. And Louisville looks like a team that, may have had some slip-ups early, but might be a team that upsets a couple more throughout this season. I just think that it's a Mario Cristobal loss. Like, that is the 100%. Prototypical loss.
Yes.
You saw it last year, losing 3 of the last 4. They looked like, no doubt college football playoff contenders with Cam Ward. You got the first pick. You can't make a conference championship. Looks like they might be trending in that direction now. But the 4 interceptions, man, for a guy like Carson Beck, you cannot have that, especially the way he'd been playing football. He had been limiting the turnovers. The one that was you're in field goal range, everything's set up for you, and then you throw that ball. It's a tough one for Miami fans.
Yeah, and I think if you probably would have looked at anyone around the country, I guess, top 5 left, odds to make the playoff, Miami had to have been probably number one easily.
They're minus 200 favorites to win the ACC. Tech was in second at minus 175. Now Tech minus 105. But now Miami is not the favorite. In my opinion, they are not the favorite anymore.
And it's just crazy how quickly the college football season can just flip on its head. It's insane. And I think you just, once again, you saw it all around the country. Georgia, once again, they had a huge comeback against Ole Miss. We talked about it on the show. Wouldn't surprise us if Ole Miss got up big in this game. And they were the number 5 team in the country as well. They were undefeated, and they got up. They were up 35-26, and they had a 4th down where if they got that stop, I think we could be having a very different conversation today. But Gunnar Stockton in a big game was, once again, he played awesome. He was 26 of 31 for 4 touchdowns, and he also ran for about 60 yards, and they ran it for over 200 yards on Ole Miss. And even though Ole Miss played a good game, it's just Georgia just has 9 lives, it seems like, Logan. Yeah.
It's like watching Oklahoma softball for like the last 5 years. It's like it doesn't matter if there's 2 outs left. I mean, you saw it when they played Tech, 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th, and they hit a 2-run home run to tie. It's just they're inevitable, and it's like teams tried to put a submission hold on Georgia, and it doesn't work. And so, I mean, we saw a little bit of more of conservative play call from Ole Miss, late into that 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter. Then you saw Georgia jump ahead, and then all of a sudden, they had to get back into it, and they were out of it by then. It's just like no one goes for the knockout punch against Georgia, but maybe because you just can't knock them out.
Yeah. Except for this next team that we're going to talk about, Alabama. They are the only team this year that has beat Georgia, and really in the past few years, I know Georgia lost to Notre Dame in the playoff, but in the regular season, Alabama has owned them the past few years, and Bama, they look really good right now. I think if besides probably Ohio State, but I think I would probably take Alabama over them right now, the way that they're playing. Ty Simpson, he continues his Heisman campaign, and if you have not seen Zabian Brown's pick 6 in this game, I think it might be one of the plays of the year so far in college football. Logan, they were your preseason national champions. Are you feeling good over there about that pick?
Yeah, I wasn't after week 1. They went to Tallahassee, and it did not look good. Now Florida State looks like one of the worst teams in the ACC. What a change that is, flipped on its head. you saw Kalen DeBoer looking like he might get canned at the end of the season, and now he's looking like Coach of the Year contender. The offense is much better than I think any of us probably could have imagined. Their run game is not great.
Yeah.
But Ty Simpson has been a revelation for Alabama, and I'm thinking some of that's got to be put on Kalen DeBoer. He's been able to develop guys like Michael Penix and guys in the past. Now he has a quarterback in his system that he believes in, and man, they just have guys everywhere now. It looks like, and it's something that I thought in the preseason they are extremely talented. Watched week 1, felt horrible about my preseason pick, and now I'm right back on the I think I made the right choice. They got to be, the favorite in the SEC, and that's crazy because you have an undefeated A&M at the top, and people are just thinking, they don't have a shot. I do think they probably have a shot to make at least the championship game. I just don't know if they can beat Alabama, and I don't know who can anymore.
Yeah, and I think Alabama's one, I guess, miscue. I don't even know if you'd call it a miscue, but just this year is their running game. If they do run into a team like A&M, or if they play Georgia again, I think that's something that maybe could come back to bite them. But man, the way that Ty Simpson and those receivers are playing, and their defense has stepped up a lot too. They got carved up by Florida State in that first game, but they've really stepped it up. And another big game that happened in the SEC this past week, Vandy. Man, like we said last week, if you would have told us 5 years ago that Vandy, first of all, would have been a favorite over LSU, but not only that, they had almost 500 yards of offense.
They dominated
For
the majority of the game.
And the score, 31-24, really was not as close as this game was. They ran for 240 yards in LSU. Diego Pavia continues his amazing season, and is there trouble in Baton Rouge for old Brian Kelly over there, Logan?
Yeah. Didn't bring it up last week very much, but it's just not a match. I just don't think that the people in Baton Rouge like Brian Kelly, and I don't think Brian Kelly likes anybody in Baton Rouge. I just don't think that it fits. And I think that with the openings that we're going to talk about here, we talked about a lot of them last week. There's a major one that opened since the last episode. He's got to just think, maybe I should leave on my own terms.
Yeah.
Don't let them fire me because he's going to eventually get fired. I think after this season, if it continues, they got another big one this week. If it continues to take a nosedive, I think that he is going to resign. I think it's going to be a mutual parting, and I think he's going to be looked at as some of these other jobs. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you see like maybe UCLA give him a run, a guy with a big buyout that's already going to have the buyout. You don't have to pay him as much. So I think James Franklin's another guy that you can see go to UCLA. I'm going to talk about him a little bit in the Florida one as well. We're going to talk about it a little bit. I just think it's not a fit, and it's never going to be a fit. And LSU's got to get a guy in there that like Tech, you got to get a guy that fits the mold of Baton Rouge and the history they have. Ed Orgeron might not have been the best coach, but man, he fit the system down there, and he won a championship because of it. And so I think we're gonna see how it plays. They're still a top 25 team, whether you believe that or not. It's gonna be a big one this weekend.
Yeah, and if every coach, obviously besides Brian Kelly to this point, and hey, maybe they have so much talent every single year, maybe they turn it around. I doubt it this year. But Saban first, which obviously Saban, he's the GOAT.
Former LSU coach, going back home.
Yeah, he won there. Les Miles won a national championship there, and then obviously Ed Orgeron won there. I might be interested to see, kind of like how you said, if Brian Kelly, which he hasn't adapted to the Louisiana culture, and that's something that's so important with that LSU job, is you have to be fully embodied to that culture, and he really hasn't been. When he got hired there, he kind of walked in and like fired everyone, which that's just a job where you don't do that. You have to, and I know he's a northern guy. Maybe Penn State reaches out, which to me, I don't know if obviously that'd be a step down in job prestige, but I think that's a job that fits Brian Kelly way more than a job LSU does.
He's got to get out of the South.
Yeah.
He's not a Southern guy. He doesn't fit he doesn't fit the SEC coaching mold. You see guys like he's not the same as Lane Kiffin. He's not the same as even a Kalen DeBoer. I mean, I know he was at Washington. He's came down. He's fit the fit the systems there. I mean, I know he was at, he had a lot of background at Alabama, but I don't know. It's just not working.
Yeah, and then, man, that's going to be interesting. They got a big one this weekend. We'll talk a little bit more later. But moving on to his old team he coached, actually, Notre Dame, they won a big one against USC, and I think Notre Dame might have secured themselves a spot in the playoffs last week with their win over USC, with how their schedule looks. USC was up, it's kind of similar to that Ole Miss Georgia game, Logan. That USC was up late in this game, and then Notre Dame had a huge kick return by Jeremiah Love for a touchdown, and then obviously they put on a later touchdown to go up by 10. They won 34-24, but Notre Dame's really turned it around too, and I know they do have 2 losses, but it is to Miami and then undefeated Texas A&M. So I think Notre Dame, they're with the rest of their schedule, they're probably going to be a playoff lock, honestly.
Yeah, I think that they should have no problems the rest of the year. I think what the big thing was when I watched this USC Notre Dame game is USC can't find a way to close games.
No.
You saw it against earlier in the year against Illinois, should have won that game.
Yeah.
It's like Lincoln Riley has the team this year to compete, and they're a step away or a play away from potentially being, in the talks, to be a Big Ten champion or in the game or even in the playoff as a at large. I think that's out of the question now for USC, but it was more about the resilience of Notre Dame, and it's just the coach. I think it's coaching there, the way that he's been able to get these players to buy in. CJ Carr has been great. Jeremiah Love is one of the best, if not the best, running back in the entire country. And then you saw reports about Florida going all in on him already. He already turned it down.
Yeah.
I think that's a great thing. He's got everything he wants there at Notre Dame, and he's loyal to them. And I think that's something that needs to be applauded for sure.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman, he's man. If after Brian Kelly left, which I know, there was some mixed feelings with him leaving. But if you would have told them, hey, you're actually going to upgrade with your hire with Marcus Freeman, I think a lot of Notre Dame fans would have probably thought you were crazy. But so far they have. I mean, he took him to a national championship last year, and his culture he's built up there is amazing. But the game we were sort of kind of talking about earlier, BYU, they beat Utah in the first ranked Holy War in 16 years, 24-21. And Utah, they had almost 500 yards of offense in this game. And if you just check the box score, you may ask yourself, dang, how did BYU win this game? Well, penalties and turning the ball over for Utah. They had 12 penalties, and then they turned the ball over twice as well. And, man, once again, just Kalani Sitake has done such a great coaching job this year and in these years past. And how about Bear Brockmeyer, Logan?
Yeah, I know I said last week that I didn't believe in that kid.
Yeah.
But God, he was really good. I think the play that really stands out was at the end of the game, that touchdown run he had, broke a couple tackles, got in the end zone. And it just seems like the buy-in from his teammates with him is exceptional. They really opened arms for him, let him come in. I just think, a couple of those, that turnover, the interception, one of them that Devin Depier had where he just kind of chunked it up.
Yeah.
It just seemed like he had given up before the game was over. And it's heartbreaking for Utah fans because they had a lot of hope. You play pretty much the 2 good teams you played so far, you've gotten beat down. I know the stats look like, Utah did well, but like you said, they look like what Tech looked like when they played in Utah. The penalties were insane. We turned the ball over a lot, except they turned it over just as much as we did.
Yeah.
And, then we ended up dominating them at home. And then, you go to Utah in probably the biggest game of the season for them. I mean, probably bigger than us because of the rivalry that was there. And you can't pull it out. Kyle Whittingham looks like, might be on his way out. Retiring. I just don't know where you go from here because they're kind of in that spot, right in that second tier. They need a lot of help to get into a Big 12 championship game. But it kind of helped Tech out a little bit. You are going to have to beat BYU. You had to do it anyway, but now you're going to kind of send them out of the Big 12 championship if you can beat them in Lubbock, assuming that everything else plays out the same way.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how Utah plays next week against Cincinnati. I think that's going to be one of probably the best games in the whole entire Big 12 this year with just the way Cincinnati's playing, and they got a big one against Baylor this week. But, Lastly, I think probably from the huge news of this past week in college football, we talked about it a bunch last week, but it officially happened. Billy Napier, he got relieved of his duties as the Florida head coach, and man, if this isn't Lane Kiffin's job, I really don't know where Florida goes, Logan.
Yeah. Losing your job after a win, that is a tough
Yeah.
one. But you're right. It's just I don't know about Florida, right? How much
Yeah.
prestige does that job have? Like, it's supposed to have a lot. And you got a guy like Billy Napier come in. Everybody thought, okay, like, is he really, the answer at Florida? He recruited extremely well, could not win the big games. But you're right. Lane Kiffin's number one on the list. It seemed like Marcus Freeman might have been
Yeah.
number one on their list. Like I was saying earlier, turned it down already, pretty much said no. And then you look at guys like Lane Kiffin. I think he would fit the mold of the Florida job, but how much better is it than Ole Miss right now? I don't know. He's got everything he wants at Ole Miss. We'll see. He kind of played it off, when being talked about it. I just think a guy like, but at Florida, you got to get a proven guy.
Yeah.
Like, the projects are going to be hard. You see the guy at South Florida. He might get a look, staying in the state of Florida. He's been really, really good. Probably going to take that team to a college football playoff appearance. I think that's a guy you can look out for. But then I think that it's got to be Lane Kiffin, like you're saying. Other than that, I think you're really just downgrading.
I wonder if they take a look at James Franklin too, which I don't know how Florida fans would feel about that, but
You would be a 10-2 team. You could not complain about, you'd have to be happy with a 10-2 record every year. Maybe one year you get into the playoff like you did last year. I just don't know. That would be a crazy experience for James Franklin.
it's almost like he'd upgrade.
Right.
He got fired.
Right. He got fired. Like looking at Cliff Kingsbury when he got fired from Tech and ends up as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of upgrade. You went to the NFL, but it's something that I don't know about. Because of the name and what he brings now. Like,
Yeah.
when you think of James Franklin right now, it's not all great. The media has really captured a pretty bad taste
Yeah.
for James Franklin, but I think he could fit in SEC. He succeeded at Vanderbilt. Can he come back down into the South and the SEC and bring them back into playoff contention? I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
The name you said, Alex Golish from South Florida, I think that'd be interesting but once again, Florida fans,
Would not like it.
They just took their shot with Billy Napier coming from Louisiana Lafayette. That's a group of 5, pretty good team every single year. And then if they were taking another shot like that, which I think that Alex Golish is a better coach than Billy Napier, I think he would succeed at Florida. But Florida fans, they want Lane Kiffin, and if they don't get him, I don't know if they're going to be happy with any of the hires they make, but.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I just don't see I feel like with the buyout guys, they have a chance to go wherever they want because the payment that they have to pay them is not as much.
Yeah.
That's why I see, James Franklin could take a shot on a smaller job, like UCLA or something, in these realms of I don't have any pressure on me anymore. Like, I have the buyout money. I could take UCLA it's not going to dish out top dollar to these coaches. But I just think Florida has to dish out top dollar right now. Like, they are in a point where they have the pieces on the team. You need a coach that's going to be able to keep them. And I don't know who that is.
Yeah, and I think based off of everything you're seeing on social media, I think Lane Kiffin probably has a blank check on his desk right now. It's going to be tough for him to turn down, but he does have a great job at Ole Miss. And speaking of Ole Miss, they actually they have another huge one this week against Oklahoma. Logan, what do you? Oklahoma they bounced back last week against South Carolina.
They played really well.
Yeah, we had talked about how tough their schedule was moving on for the rest of this year, and maybe Brent Venables was a guy that that seat could have been getting warmer, but they got a big win on the road. And what do you think this game looks like, Logan?
This is a tough one, coming off, the loss against Georgia. What does Ole Miss look like? Do they come back out and do they play like the team in the first half, the first 3 quarters, or do they play like the team that gave up that big lead? I just think Oklahoma is a little underrated on the defensive side of the football. And if you can stop Ole Miss, which no one really has stopped them offensively, I just don't know how healthy John Mateer still is. He didn't throw for very many yards last week.
Yeah.
He still seems to be a little off accuracy-wise. And I feel like Lane Kiffin and his staff, they're going to have a good game plan against him. So I feel much better about Ole Miss than I do Oklahoma right now.
Yeah, I agree. And last time I checked, which, the line could have moved, this morning, but Oklahoma was favored like -4, which to me is really interesting. And I don't know. I agree, though, with what your sentiment on this game, because I think Ole Miss, they have all around, especially offensively, the better offensive squad. And if they go in and get a lead like they did against Georgia, I think it's going to be really tough for Oklahoma to come back, just the way that their offense has played the past few weeks. But man, it's going to be a great game. And the next great game as we stay in the SEC, Vandy once again has another huge home game against Missouri. Missouri, their last game against Alabama, they took them down to the wire. They had a chance to go down and win that game, but the Bama defense held up, and now Vandy really has a chance to make a statement here. I know they really did this past weekend against LSU, but I think you could see Vandy really move up in the polls if they win another big home game like this, Logan.
Yeah, I think that they should be seen as the favorite for sure in this game. I just don't know how much I trust Bo Padula.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name, something like that.
Yeah.
After he looked against Alabama, a couple interceptions, he finally looked like immortal. He had been playing absolutely out of his mind up to that point. You saw a really good defense in Alabama that week. Now you're going to see a Vanderbilt team that's playing, at an all-time high. They look unbeatable at some points this year. They dominate LSU last week. I just don't think that Missouri's going to be able to stop Diego Pavia this coming week, and I think that Vanderbilt picks up another big win, another top 20 win, and they are just going to continue to move up, and now they're going to look like real SEC contenders going into the home stretch.
Their resume already looks good, but if they have another win like this, I think Vandy might secure themselves a playoff spot if they win this weekend. But going back to the Big 12, we talked about BYU earlier. They have a big one this week at Iowa State. Iowa State, they started off the season 5-0. And they've lost their past 2 games. They do get this one at home, and they actually are the favorites in this game. They are about a 3-point favorite. What do you think this game looks like, Logan?
Okay, so might be a little interesting to talk about here, but I see this BYU team a lot like last year's.
Yeah.
They were undefeated, fell off the tracks at the end. Pick up the big win against Colorado in the bowl game. I have that same feeling here. I don't know what it is. It's just something about this team. A lot of close calls. Colorado, Arizona, a lot of close calls. Last week they even had a chance. Got some breaks. But Iowa State looks like a team that they always come through when they're kind of doubted a little bit. I know they're 3-point favorite, which is basically a pick 'em on a neutral site. I think that having the home crowd, Rocco Beck, some of these guys that are going to step up in a big-time moment, I think that Iowa State pulls off what is technically rating-wise an upset. They are favored, so not technically, but I think that they're going to pick up a big win, and I think we see a different outlook on BYU heading into the following week.
Yeah, I think this is such like a typical Matt Campbell game where they just show up and they win this by 2 touchdowns or something.
Just dominate the entire game.
Yeah, but selfishly, since we do play BYU here in a few weeks in Lubbock, I kind of wish they were undefeated, but I agree. I think Iowa State probably wins this game. But the game we spoke about earlier with LSU and A&M, this is if like we said earlier, if LSU loses this game, they're an underdog at home at night. That's pretty rare in Death Valley to be an underdog at night, especially against A&M. But A&M, they actually kind of dominated LSU in this game last year, and Marcel Reed played a really good game. Do you think you see a similar approach with using Marcel Reed's legs in this game and kind of just?
Yeah. I think it's A&M's game to lose. I think LSU is just on a free fall right now. Nussmeier does not look like the same guy that we thought coming into the season. Brian Kelly again talked about him. Doesn't look like the coach we thought that he was. when he first got there, or even when he was at Notre Dame. But guy that really stands out to me is Caden Durham.
Yeah.
If he can take over games, we saw a big time performance. A couple big runs against Vandy. He was the one that really kind of kept them in things. A couple big plays. From the receiving core as well. I just don't. If he can, control the pace of the game, we may see a closer game. But A&M's playing very, very well, and they're going to Death Valley, where they haven't had a problem playing in the past. I just don't see LSU being able to put up enough points, to stay with that firepower. Probably, arguably one of the best receiver duos in the country that A&M has, and so I think A&M puts up a lot of points. I think Marcel Reed plays great.
Yeah, and LSU, I think they're going to be missing their left tackle in this game too, which is A&M's defense. I know that their secondary's gotten kind of torched a lot of games this year, but their front seven is good, and Nussmeier and those receivers have not really threatened many secondaries this year. So I think A&M looks good in this matchup. And then the last game we'll talk about here, going back to the Big 12. Talk about a team that we beat on the road, and then a team that we just lost to on the road. Arizona State, they host 6-1 Houston. Houston, we are their only loss this year, but I will say, I'm pleasantly surprised by the way that they've played this year. I don't think they can beat Arizona State this week. I think they can keep this game close, so I think they can give them a game. I think Willie Fritz is just such a great coach, and I think that you'll see a close one, but Arizona State eventually pulls it out in the end.
Is this one at home?
It's at Arizona State.
Arizona State, yeah. I just, Houston's a team that I just think are overachieving a little too much.
Yeah.
They're not real contenders in my book for the Big 12, but I would be pleasantly surprised if they can pull out a W, and it really would help Texas Tech out big time. So I hope they win. I don't see it happening unless we see, a Sam Levitt who is back to trying to run around the yard instead of sitting in the pocket, because we saw – they got some pretty decent coverage guys on Houston. We saw Texas Tech have a little bit of a early trouble with them, and we ended up, the defense just dominated Houston. And I think we're going to see a similar thing there if Connor Wegman can make a couple plays. This game will be close. I think I'm going to pick, you know what? Whatever. Houston by 6. Let's go.
Hey, just because they beat us last week. Hey,
yeah, might as well.
Yeah, it would look good for our resume too. Now. This is something we have not talked about on any of our past shows this year so far, but in 2 weeks we are transitioning college sports here.
It's basketball season in the 806.
It is basketball season very, very soon here in the 806, and your Texas Tech Red Raiders are a top 10 preseason team. This roster just has been built, I think, just so well by Coach McCaslin, and just – once again, all the buy-in from all the donors this offseason. And, man, I'm so excited to see the season tip off here against Lindenwood here on November 4th. And, man, Christian Anderson, JT Toppin.
Lawan
Watts. This team just has so many weapons. And how excited are you for the season, Logan?
It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun. I think we're going to find out real early how good this team really is. You go to Illinois with some big-time players on that team. Andre Stojakovic, he's been really good in his time in collegiate basketball. He's now over there. A foreign-built team in Illinois. But, Texas Tech isn't playing the same schedule that we've seen in the past. They got a lot of big games in the non-con, and of course, you play in the Big 12 Conference. The basketball season is going to be incredibly difficult. I think Texas Tech is going to probably end up with a top 7-8 strength of schedule by the end of the season. Now, is this team top 5? That is something that has been discussed all over the country for Texas Tech. This team's kind of unknown in some certain aspects of this team. You got 2 proven guys who have done it at the Big 12 level. Christian Anderson and JT Toppin are going to lead the charge. We know that. The loss of Darion Williams, but the replacement of a guy who is almost identical. Yeah. Shoots the ball a little better, but almost an identical play style in Lawan Watts. He's going to be the guy that makes or breaks this team, in my opinion. And then you got 2 guys, Tyree Bryan and Donovan Atwell, who are also guys on the outside that have to shoot the ball well. If they do not shoot the ball well, this team is going to fall a little flat.
Yeah, and they're going to be the replacements shooting-wise, like for Chance McMillan and Kerwin Walton, and just how potent we were offensively last year. You know, we were 4 minutes away from going to the Final Four. That one still stings. I know for both of us.
Thinking back, if we didn't play 5 extra minutes against Arkansas, how different does the Florida game look? Maybe a little different.
Yeah, and this preseason schedule, man, I'm so excited to see. Instead of really a bunch of teams that don't challenge us much, I think that's something that could have helped us out last year a lot, especially in the tournament. I think we actually scrimmage Iowa this weekend, and we'll get to look at Bennett Sturts again, and Ben McCollum from Drake last year. But man, I'm so excited to see, first off, going to Illinois, then the Baja Mar tournament. We get Wake Forest, potentially Purdue.
I'm thinking we're getting Purdue.
Yeah,
number one team in the country. Yeah. We're getting
Purdue. Then we get Duke, and then potentially a big Texas Tech weekend in early December if our football team continues their trajectory, wins out, and goes to the Big 12 championship. That Saturday, they'll be in the Big 12 championship. Well, the day after that, Texas Tech gets to play LSU in Fort Worth at Dickies Arena. And then the weekend after that, they actually go back to Dallas and play Arkansas. So, man, this non-conference is a gauntlet, but I think it's a non-conference that's going to help us out. I think if we say we go like 3-3 or 4-2 in this stretch, that is going to look so good on our resume, especially if we get second or obviously first in the Big 12. It's going to be a challenge with teams like Houston and BYU this year. But, man, I'm just so excited for the season, Logan.
Yeah, I think something that have been talked about in Lubbock is the non-conference schedule that we've seen, not just with Coach McCaskill and with Mark Adams, even back to Chris Beard days. What really stands out in the past is the committee loves non-conference games. Whether you win or lose, they don't deduct you for losing. They only benefit you for winning. Why not play these games? Why not be nationally televised against Duke at Madison Square Garden? I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. If you beat a Duke team led by Cam Boozer and Caden Boozer, I mean, look at you now, right? You're looked at as a much different team. If you go beat Purdue, I mean, it's going to be extremely challenging, but they have the players in place, and we're going to find out real early. And I think that's what's the best. We don't have to wait until New Year's to find out what this team is really like. And then you have the letdown game that you had against UCF last year in the first game because you didn't play anybody.
Right.
And so now you're going to be ready to go. You're going to start Big 12 schedule off right. I think you're going to play arguably the toughest. I mean, you're going to play the toughest conference schedule. And there's some stretches in there where you play Baylor, Arizona, Houston. You play some, Houston, BYU. It's going to be a tough one, and I am excited. And it's going to be something that it's going to be interesting in the 806. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think last thing I'll touch on just our team this year. I think maybe you could argue last year's team was top heavy with like our 4 stars, I guess. With JT, Christian, and Darian and Chance. But I think this year, obviously getting them back, all the guys that we brought in, we have, in my opinion at least, a way deeper team. And I think that's something that kind of hurt us as well last year. Florida was so deep, and they could rotate. I mean, they had like 11 or 12 guys that they could just continuously rotate in. And, Grant really closed his rotations down. We had about, 7 and then potentially like an 8th guy coming in just for a few minutes in March. But I think this year we have a legit like 10 guys, 11 guys that can play major minutes. And you've seen, Coach McCaskill in interviews this offseason talk about guys like Jalen Petty and Nolan Groves, even Latrell Hoover. He's given some credit to, alongside the guys we brought in like Tyree Bryan, Donovan Atwell, and I think maybe our most impactful transfer besides Lawan Watts, Luke Bangboye, maybe the best defensive center in the whole entire country, Logan. And man, what do you think about him?
Yeah, he, number 1 on Andy Kratz's defensive player list, which is crazy because JoJo Tugler was at 3rd, and he is the reigning Big 12 defensive player of the year and preseason Big 12 player or defensive player of the year. I think that one thing stands out to me as a question mark on this team, and it's guard depth. You got a lot of young guys behind Christian Anderson. I know you're going to play Christian Anderson a majority of the minutes, as noted, but then you got a lot of wings. You don't really have a lot of primary ball handlers. I know we're going to see Lawan Watts take some of that over. I think Jalen Petty's going to probably have to take that role. I think it's going to be kind of an instance where we saw last year with the Christian Anderson and Elijah Hawkins kind of guy, but Christian Anderson is less of the ball distributor that Hawkins was, because Hawkins didn't score at the rate that we expect Christian Anderson to. So what I want to see early is that kind of depth on that side. Front court is going to be great. Our wings should be great. But the guard spot, the primary ball handler spot, is something that I really need to see, play out. I know we have a great starting point guard. We know that. We saw him all summer dominate in the FIBA. It's just going to be something that, you got to see. Grant loves his team, but you're right. Luke Bamboye is going to be the cornerstone of the defensive play. We don't need him to score. We don't need a scoring center that needs to score 50 points a game. We have that in JT Toppin. But interested in spacing on the offensive side of the basketball. He's not a threat to shoot. He's got to be around the block. That's where JT thrived last year. Do we see too much congestion in the paint, or do we see JT step out, which I don't know how I feel about JT stepping out and playing on three-point line. But we'll see. Yeah. Grant knows what he's doing. The staff knows what they're doing. Great offensive staff, but I am interested to see how it looks in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
And that's going to wrap things up here for our third episode of the Guns Blazin podcast. Make sure y'all tune in every week. Next week, we'll be back with a preview of Kansas State as well as a recap of Oklahoma State. Hopefully, there's no new coaching fires, in the next week, as we're got to be approaching an NCAA record for coaching firings so far this season. Texas Tech will take on Oklahoma State this Saturday at 3 o'clock at Jones AT&T Stadium. It is Parents Weekend in the 806, so it'll be a packed weekend here. So make sure y'all tune in to our next episode next week as we break down everything you need to know, and we're 1 week closer to basketball season in the 806. Thank y'all for joining, and make sure you like, subscribe, send this to all your friends, and hope you enjoyed. And as always, wreck 'em.
From Miller Waldrop Studios, this is Campus Live.